The world was already crashing down on me. They fired me the day before my son's surgery, an act so cold, so brutal, that it shattered everything I thought I knew about loyalty, trust, and fairness. In the blink of an eye, I went from being a dedicated employee to a desperate man, standing on the edge of losing it all. But what they didn't count on was the fire I had inside me. I wasn't just going to fall into their trap of defeat. I was going to rise from the ashes of their betrayal and take back everything they tried to steal from me. This isn't just my fight. It's the fight for everything they've tried to bury. Hi, I'm John Carpenter, and this is my story. Listen closely, because you won't want to miss how it all unfolds. Subscribe now and join me on this journey. The day I got fired was the worst day of my life. It wasn't just because of the job. It was everything that led up to it, everything that had been building up, and how it all came crashing down at once. I had been working at that company for 7 years, putting in late nights, working weekends, and doing whatever it took to climb the corporate ladder. At first it was all for me. Ambition, proving myself, getting ahead. But as the years went by, it wasn't about me anymore. It was about providing for my family, about giving my son a life that I never had, making sure he had every opportunity to thrive. I remember the night before everything fell apart. I was sitting at the kitchen table going through papers, scheduling my son's surgery. It was all set. The doctor had cleared him for a procedure that would change his life forever, maybe even save it. My son, Jason, was born with a rare heart defect, one that would require surgeries every few years, each one more complicated than the last. The surgery was coming up in 2 weeks, and everything had to be perfect. I promised him I would be there, right by his side. But that night, as I went through the final details of the insurance forms, I could feel a knot forming in my stomach. I couldn't shake the sense that something was wrong. The company had been giving me the runaround for weeks about a promotion that I had worked my ass off for. They kept saying, "Not yet. Hold on. We're reviewing." I was growing more and more frustrated, but I kept telling myself it was all part of the game. You keep your head down, do the work, and eventually they'll reward you. The next morning I had a meeting scheduled with my boss, the one who had always given me just enough encouragement to make me think the promotion was around the corner. But when I walked into that office, I immediately knew something was off. My boss was sitting behind his desk, and there was someone else in the room with him, a legal advisor, I think. His face was cold, unreadable. It wasn't like our usual chats where he'd sit back in his chair and toss me some small talk before we got down to business. No, this time, it felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. "John," he said, his voice clipped. "I'm afraid we have some bad news." My heart skipped a beat. I tried to stay calm, but my palms were sweating. "What's going on?" "We've decided to let you go," he said, his eyes not meeting mine. "Effective immediately." I blinked as if I had misheard. It didn't make sense. "You're firing me? Right now?" "Yes," he said. "It's just not working out. We're restructuring and we've had to make some tough decisions. Your position is being eliminated." I could feel the blood draining from my face. This wasn't happening. It couldn't be. Not today. Not with my son's surgery looming in 2 weeks. I had made arrangements. I had set everything up. How could they do this? How could they just rip everything away from me? I tried to stay composed, but I could feel the panic rising in my chest. "You're kidding, right? This is some kind of joke?" "I'm afraid not," he said. "We'll provide you with a severance package and help with the transition, but that's all we can do." Severance. It was a slap in the face. They were offering me a few months' worth of pay, but it wasn't about the money. It was about the principle. About what they were doing to me, to my family. I had given them everything. Late nights, missed family events, sacrifices I'd made for the company, and this was how they thanked me? By tossing me out the door like I was nothing. I tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. What was there to say? I didn't have the strength to argue. I didn't have the energy to fight back. It was all too much. I could feel my hands shaking as I gathered my things, the resignation settling in like a cold weight in my stomach. "John, I'm sorry it had to be this way," my boss said, but there was no sincerity in his voice. This wasn't about me at all. This was about them and their bottom line. They didn't care about my life, my family, or what I was going through. I was just another casualty in their endless pursuit of profit. I walked out of the office, my mind a blur, my heart racing. I could barely hear the murmurs of my colleagues as I passed them on the way out, too caught up in my own thoughts to register anything around me. I didn't even care to say goodbye. As I stepped into the elevator, I could feel the weight of everything crashing down on me. I couldn't lose this job, not now, not with Jason's surgery coming up. I needed this job. My family needed it. What was I supposed to do now? The doors of the elevator closed, and for the first time, I felt like I was truly alone. There was no way out of this. I had lost everything, but deep down, something inside of me refused to accept it. I couldn't let this be the end, not when so much was at stake. I wasn't sure how I was going to fight back, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going down without a fight. And maybe, just maybe, I had a weapon that would make them regret this decision. The drive home felt like I was moving through a haze. The world around me was distorted, like I was watching my life through a foggy window. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, but I wasn't sure if I was holding on for stability or because I was trying to keep myself from tearing the car apart. My mind raced, but nothing made sense. The meeting, the words my boss had said, they didn't connect with the reality I was facing. I could still hear his cold voice echoing in my ears. Your position is being eliminated. I wasn't even sure how I'd managed to drive home. The silence of the car was deafening, broken only by the rhythmic hum of the tires on the asphalt, but it felt like the quiet before a storm. I could barely focus on the road. I should have been thinking about Jason, about the surgery, but instead all I could think about was the betrayal. The company had been my life. For 7 years, I'd poured my heart and soul into that place. I had sacrificed weekends, vacations, time with my family. All of it, every bit of it, had been for this job, for a future that now seemed to evaporate in an instant. When I pulled into the driveway, I just sat there for a few moments. The car was parked in front of my house, but I couldn't move. I couldn't bring myself to face the reality of what had just happened. My stomach twisted in knots. I couldn't walk into the house and tell my wife the news. I couldn't see her face when she found out that the one thing we had been counting on, the one thing that had been holding us together through everything, had just been ripped away from me. Eventually, I gathered the strength to open the door. The house smelled like coffee and fresh laundry. It was strange how normal everything felt. The world was still turning, yet I was in free fall. As soon as I walked in, my wife, Sarah, looked up from the kitchen counter. She saw the look on my face, the kind of look that told her everything without a single word being spoken. "John," she asked, her voice soft, like she already knew. "What happened?" I didn't answer right away. I couldn't. The words wouldn't come. Instead, I just dropped my keys on the table and collapsed into the chair, burying my face in my hands. The weight of it all was too much to carry. The job, Jason's surgery, the house, the bills, the future. It all felt like it was slipping through my fingers. They fired me, I muttered, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. Sarah froze. "What? Why?" "They said the position was being eliminated. They're restructuring." I couldn't even say it without a bitter laugh, the absurdity of it all striking me like a punch in the gut. It's like they don't even care that Jason's surgery is in 2 weeks. Sarah stared at me for a moment, as though processing the words. Her face softened, and she moved to sit beside me, placing her hand on my arm. "John, we'll figure this out. We always do. But how are we going to make this work? I don't even understand why they would do this to you. You've given them everything." I just shook my head. The anger inside me boiled, but I didn't have the energy to fight. Not now. I don't know. Maybe it's just about money. Maybe they figured they could get someone cheaper to do my job. But it doesn't matter. This is real. I don't have a job anymore. We don't have a paycheck. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away quickly. She didn't want to cry. She wanted to be strong for me, just like I had. Always tried to be strong for her. But the reality was we were both losing our grip. Jason's surgery was already costly enough, and now this. What were we supposed to do? I stood up and walked toward the window, staring out into the yard. The world felt like it had gone silent, like everything was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I needed to get a grip, to be strong for Sarah, for Jason. But inside I was screaming. I had worked so damn hard for this life, and they had taken it from me in an instant. I'd been loyal, I'd been patient, and now I had nothing. "I'll figure something out," I said, though the words felt hollow even as I spoke them. But I didn't know how. I had no idea what I was going to do, how I was going to pull us out of this mess. I had no backup plan, no safety net. It was always supposed to be temporary. I'd climb up and eventually I'd have enough to keep us going. But now, everything was gone, and I was left holding an empty promise. It wasn't just about the job, though. It was about the principle, the betrayal, the way they had treated me like a disposable cog in their machine. That offer letter they had given me. Hell, that offer letter now felt like a joke, a lie. They had promised me stability, security. But what had I really gotten? Nothing but an illusion. Sarah didn't say anything for a while. I could feel her staring at me, probably wondering what was going through my head. Then finally, she spoke. "You can't let them get away with this," she said, her voice steady, determined. "We need to do something. This isn't just about a job. It's about them messing with our lives." I turned to face her. The words she spoke hit me like a punch to the chest. Maybe she was right. Maybe I could do something about this. I had nothing left to lose. I looked down at the offer letter still crumpled in my pocket, the letter that had once promised me everything. Maybe it wasn't a joke. Maybe it was a weapon, and I was going to use it. But I knew I couldn't do it alone. And I knew it was going to take everything I had, everything I was willing to sacrifice to fight back. "All right," I said, my voice low, the anger and resolve starting to simmer beneath the surface. "Let's do this." That night I couldn't sleep. The weight of everything crushed me. My son's surgery, the looming uncertainty about my future, and the gnawing betrayal of a company I had given my blood, sweat, and tears to. The house was quiet. Sarah had fallen asleep next to me, her steady breathing a reminder that I wasn't alone in this. But I still felt alone. I felt like I had been abandoned, not just by the company, but by everyone who ever told me that hard. Work paid off. That loyalty mattered. I couldn't stop replaying the conversation in my head. "We're restructuring." The words kept echoing in my mind. Restructuring, it didn't make sense. The company had been doing just fine. In fact, they had been growing. They had been expanding their operations. How could they fire me now, right before my son's surgery, knowing how much was at stake for my family? It was as if they were purposefully timing it, making sure I had no time to recover, no room to breathe. But what really stung, what really felt like a knife in the back, was the fact that they didn't even care enough to give me a reason. No explanation, no warning, just a sudden, heartless decision. I wasn't even worth an honest conversation. The company had decided I was disposable, and that was it. I had given everything for them, and when I needed them the most, they didn't even bother to give me the decency of a heads-up. As I sat there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, my mind began to spiral. I needed answers, and I needed them fast. But not just answers. I needed revenge. Not just to get my job back, not just for the severance package, but for the principle of it all. This wasn't about a paycheck anymore. This was about respect. They had stripped that from me, and I wasn't going to let it slide. Not now. Not when my son's future depended on it. I got out of bed quietly, careful not to wake Sarah. I walked to the kitchen, my mind racing. I pulled open the drawer and grabbed the offer letter they had given me when I first joined the company. The ink was faded now, the paper slightly crumpled, but it still held power. At least it should. The offer letter, the one that had once made me feel like I was on top of the world, was now my only piece of leverage. I had to admit, a part of me felt disgusted by the thought. How could something that once symbolized everything I had worked for now be used against them? But then again, how could they betray me like this and expect me to roll over? They had crossed a line, and now I was going to make them regret it. I sat at the kitchen table reading the letter over and over again, looking for anything I might have missed. It was a well-crafted document, solid with terms that seemed ironclad at the time. But now I was searching for cracks, for any hint of a loophole I could exploit. The more I read, the more I realized there might be something here, something that could turn the tables in my favor. I knew that I had to get a lawyer involved. There was no way I could do this alone. But that thought was almost laughable. I didn't have any money. I had just lost my job, and Jason's surgery was already draining us financially. The only thing I had left was this letter, and the bitter taste of betrayal. It was then that I remembered someone from my past, a former colleague, Jack, who had been through a similar situation. Jack had been let go from a different company, under almost identical circumstances. He had fought back, and not only had he won, but he had exposed some serious wrongdoing in the process. If anyone knew how to navigate this legal minefield, it was Jack. I hadn't spoken to him in years, but I knew one thing for sure. I had to reach out to him. I grabbed my phone, my fingers trembling as I searched for his contact. I hesitated for a moment before I hit the dial button. I wasn't sure if he would even pick up, but I had to try. The phone rang 3 times before he answered. "John?" Jack's voice was familiar but distant. "What's up? It's been a long time." "Jack, I need your help," I said, my voice rough. "I've been fired. I don't even know where to start." There was a long pause on the other end. Could hear him exhale slowly, like he already knew what was coming. "Yeah, I kind of figured you'd be calling me sooner or later," he said, his tone strangely calm. "What happened?" I don't know, man. They just fired me. Just like that. No explanation, nothing. It was a complete shock. But that's not the worst part. They did it right before my son's surgery. I'm scrambling here. I don't know what to do." Jack's tone shifted. It wasn't sympathy or pity. It was strategy. He wasn't going to sugarcoat things for me. He was going to give it to me straight. "Okay, first things first. You need to stop feeling sorry for yourself. You need to get your head in the game. You've got something they don't think you have. The offer letter. I'm guessing, they made you sign something that ties them to the decision, right?" "Yeah," I said, holding the letter in my hands. "But I don't know what I can do with it. They've got all the power." "No, man, they don't," Jack said, his voice growing more firm. "That letter, it's your weapon. I don't know what's in it, but you need to read it again. You need to get a lawyer to go over it with you. I know it's expensive, but trust me, you can't afford not to. This is your leverage, and once you've got them cornered, they'll regret messing with you." I swallowed hard. A part of me wanted to argue, to tell Jack that I didn't have the money for lawyers for the fight for anything. But another part of me, something deeper, knew he was right. I had to fight. I couldn't let them do this to me. Not after everything I had done for them. "You're right," I said, a new sense of resolve building inside me. "I'm going to do it. I'm going to fight back." Jack was quiet for a moment, and then he spoke again. "Good. But be ready. John, they won't just let you walk away with what's yours. This is going to get ugly. You have to be prepared for that." "I'm ready," I said, my voice steady now. "I've got nothing left to lose." "All right," Jack said, "I'll help you find a lawyer. Get that letter in order, and we'll go from there. But don't wait. This needs to happen fast." I hung up the phone and sat there for a while, the weight of it all settling over me again. But this time, it was different. There was a spark, a flicker of defiance in the back of my mind. I wasn't just going to let them walk all over me. I had a plan now, a way to fight back, and I wasn't going to stop until I got what I deserved. They had no idea what they were about to unleash. The days after that conversation with Jack blurred together. I went through the motions, waking up, getting dressed, and pretending to go through the motions of life. But my mind was consumed with one thing, the fight ahead. I couldn't think of anything else. The weight of what had happened was suffocating, but in a strange way I felt a sense of purpose. I wasn't just reeling from the loss of my job anymore. I was formulating a plan. The offer letter wasn't just a piece of paper. It was my ticket to justice, my chance to make them pay for everything they'd done. But as much as I told myself I was in control, the reality of it all hit me in waves. Every time I thought about the surgery coming up, the stakes of my son's future, I felt the crushing pressure on my chest. I wasn't just fighting for a paycheck anymore. I was fighting for my family, for Jason's future. The surgery was going to be costly, way beyond what insurance would cover, and now the idea of scraping by without any income seemed impossible. I hadn't told Sarah everything. Not yet. I hadn't told her that I was seriously considering suing the company, that I was going to use their own documents against them. I couldn't bear to watch the look of worry on her face, not now when she was already trying to hold everything together. I knew she would support me no matter what, but I also knew how this could tear her apart. She had her own battles, her job, keeping the house together, dealing with Jason's health issues. She didn't need another burden. But as the days passed, I knew I couldn't keep it from her forever. The tension between us was starting to show, even in the quiet moments. The unspoken words lingered in the air, heavy and thick. Every time we sat down for dinner, I could feel the unease radiating between us. I wasn't the same person I had been. I was changing, and I wasn't sure if I was becoming someone she could still recognize. The breaking point came on a Tuesday afternoon, just a few days before Jason's surgery. I had spent the entire morning going over the offer letter again and again, trying to decipher every word, every clause. I had called a lawyer, but money was tight, and the consultations were expensive. I hadn't even come close to affording what I needed, but Jack had insisted. It's worth it, trust me. Still, I couldn't stop thinking about the mountain of bills piling up, the looming surgery, and the fact that I was already behind on my mortgage payments. All those things felt like a ton of bricks on my chest, and there was no escape. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. It felt like I was trapped in a never-ending cycle of fear and frustration, each day slipping away faster than the last. That afternoon, Sarah came into the living room, where I was buried in paperwork. Her eyes were tired, dark circles under them, the stress starting to show on her face as well. She sat down beside me, her voice gentle but insistent. "John, we need to talk," she said. "What's going on? You've been distant for days. I can feel it." I felt my stomach tighten. This was it. I couldn't hide it from her anymore. The truth was sitting between us, a palpable thing. I've been looking into my options, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "What do you mean?" "Looking into your options?" she asked, her brow furrowing. "You're not still thinking of going back to them, are you?" I shook my head. "No, I'm not going back. But I'm not letting this slide either." Her confusion deepened. "What are you talking about?" "I'm going to sue them," I said, the words feeling foreign as I said them aloud. I had barely even allowed myself to think them before now, but here they were, spilling out of my mouth like a confession. "Wait, what?" she asked, blinking as if she hadn't heard me right. "You're going to sue your former company? For what?" "I'm going to use the offer letter. There's a legal loophole that they've missed. If I play this right, I can turn the tables," I said, my voice more forceful now. "They can't just do this to me. Not when I've given them everything. They can't treat me like this and expect to get away with it." She didn't say anything for a long moment, just stared at me, her face unreadable. I couldn't tell if she was angry, confused, or scared. Maybe all three. "You're serious about this?" she asked quietly. I nodded. "I'm not just going to sit back and let them crush us. I've worked too hard. They don't get to throw me away like this, not after everything. Not when Jason needs me. I won't let it happen." She took a deep breath, running a hand through her hair. "But John, do you realize what this could do to us? The legal costs? The time it's going to take, the stress, do you really think it's worth it? And what about Jason's surgery? We can't afford any more surprises right now." I swallowed hard. "I don't know, Sarah. I don't know what's going to happen, but I have to do this for Jason, for us. If I don't fight back, they'll just keep doing this to people, to families. They've already taken so much from us. I won't let them take everything." Her eyes softened, but I could see the doubt there too. The fear, she was scared. I could feel it in her voice when she spoke again. "And what if it doesn't work out?" she asked. "What if it gets worse?" "I don't know," I admitted, the weight of my words pressing down on me. "But I can't just let them win. I have to try, for us, for Jason." There was a long silence. Then finally she reached out and took my hand. Her touch was warm, but I could feel the tremble in her fingers, the uncertainty we were both grappling with. "I just want this to be over, John. I want Jason to get better. I want everything to go back to normal, she said, her voice barely audible. But I'll stand by you. If this is what you need to do, then I'll support you. Just promise me you'll be careful. Promise me you won't lose yourself in this fight. I nodded, my throat tight with emotion. I promise. And for the first time in days, I felt a sense of clarity. The storm wasn't over, not by a long shot, but I wasn't alone. We were in this together, and that meant something. But the fight was far from easy. It was going to take everything I had. And just as I started to feel a glimmer of hope, I knew deep down that the worst was yet to come. I spent the next few days going over the offer letter again and again. I took it apart like a puzzle, obsessively reading every clause, every word, looking for something I could use. I couldn't afford to miss a single detail. I knew the company wasn't just going to roll over. They'd do everything they could to bury me. But if I could find even the smallest hole in their legal armor, that could be enough to crack it wide open. I called Jack again, explaining how far I'd gotten, but also admitting that I was still stuck. I needed a lawyer who could see this from the right angle, someone who could spot a weakness where I couldn't. Jack knew someone. He was a former corporate lawyer who had left the firm to start his own practice. His name was Gabe. Gabe's good, John. He's got the chops and he won't hesitate to take on these big companies, Jack assured me, his voice steady, reassuring. But he's not cheap. If you're serious about this, you'll need to come up with the money for the consultation, at least. He'll help you strategize, but don't expect him to work for free. I hung up the phone, running my hand through my hair. Money was a problem. It was always a problem. Sarah and I had barely enough to make it through each month. The bills were piling up, the mortgage, the medical expenses, the surgery. Everything was becoming overwhelming. But I couldn't let fear dictate my next move. This was my shot. If I was going to fight back, I had to take the risk. I sold a few old items, things I didn't even think twice about before. The TV, the spare furniture, a couple of the tech gadgets I'd once considered luxuries. It wasn't a lot, but it was enough to scrape together the funds for Gabe's consultation. If there was even a slim chance that I could turn this around, it was worth every penny. The day I met Gabe, I was both hopeful and anxious. I had never been in a lawyer's office before, never thought I'd need to be. But now here I was, sitting across from a man who could determine whether I had a future or if I was about to dig myself into a hole I couldn't climb out of. Gabe was everything I hadn't expected. Young, casual in his dress, and surprisingly empathetic. He didn't look like the type to be throwing around corporate jargon or giving me a lecture on how this would ruin my life. Instead, he listened, really listened, as I explained everything. The company's abrupt firing, my son's health, the offer letter, and my desire to fight back. Here's the thing, John, Gabe said after a long pause. From what you've told me, this looks like a textbook case of wrongful termination. The timing, just before your son's surgery, with no warning or clear reason for your firing, could give you some solid grounds to challenge them. But you're right. It's all going to come down to that offer letter. If there's even the slightest discrepancy in how they presented their terms to you, or if there's something in their contract that they're not honoring, we might have them cornered. I couldn't help the rush of adrenaline that coursed through me. For the first time in days, I felt like there was a real chance. So you think I have a shot? I think you've got a shot, but you've got to be prepared for a long fight. It's not going to be easy, Gabe warned me, his tone shifting. Corporations like this don't give up without a fight, and they've got a lot more resources than you. We're talking about months, maybe even years, before this is over. My stomach dropped. I knew this was going to be difficult, but hearing it out loud was a wake-up call. I couldn't afford to back down. Not now. Not when everything was on the line. I'm ready, I said, my voice firmer than I felt. I don't care how long it takes. I'm not going to let them get away with this. Gabe nodded, his eyes sharp. Good. But here's the thing, we can't just go in guns blazing making threats. You have to be strategic. This needs to be handled carefully. We'll start by sending them a letter of intent, something professional. Something that lets them know you're serious but without putting them on the defensive just yet. It was a start, but the more Gabe explained, the more I understood how much work was ahead of me. Every decision had to be calculated. I couldn't afford to make any mistakes. One wrong move, one misstep, and the whole thing could fall apart. We spent the next few hours drafting that letter. Gabe was meticulous, making sure everything was airtight. He didn't want to give the company any chance to wiggle out of the situation. I had to admit I was impressed by his precision, his focus. This wasn't some fly-by-night lawyer looking to cash in on an easy case. Gabe was smart, and he wasn't afraid of a fight. By the time I left his office, I felt a little lighter, a little more confident. We had the first step. The legal battle was on. But as I drove home, I couldn't help but wonder how much it was all going to cost. The letter, the legal fees, the time I was about to invest. None of that was going to be easy. And that nagging feeling in my gut returned. Was I doing the right thing? What if it all backfired? What if, in the end, I lost everything? I didn't have an answer, but one thing was clear. I wasn't turning back. Not now. Not when it was all on the line. When I walked through the door, Sarah was waiting for me, sitting on the couch, her eyes searching mine. "Well?" she asked, her voice steady but expectant. I took a deep breath, my chest tight. "We're moving. Forward." "Gabe thinks we have a shot. We're sending the letter tomorrow." Sarah's face softened and she stood up, walking toward me. "I knew you wouldn't back down," she said, her voice warm. "But, John, this is really going to be a battle. I hope you're ready for it." "I'm ready," I said. "We don't have a choice." And just like that, the fight began. But as the first move was made, I realized I was only scratching the surface of a much deeper battle. The company wouldn't just let this go. They'd come at me with everything they had. And I had to be ready for whatever came next. The days after sending the letter were an emotional roller coaster. I'd expected some sort of reaction from the company, but I didn't expect it to come so quickly. 3 days after Gabe's letter went out, we got the response. A cease and desist letter from their legal team demanding that I immediately stop my legal pursuit. They claimed that my accusations were baseless and that the firing was entirely legitimate under their policies. When the letter arrived, I felt a jolt of fear shoot through me. It wasn't just a letter, it was a warning. They weren't playing around anymore. The letter came on letterhead, the kind of paper you'd expect from a massive corporation, and it hit me hard. There was no kindness in it, no invitation for mediation or negotiation. They weren't just saying stop, they were saying, "We'll destroy you if you keep going." I remember sitting at the kitchen table with the letter in front of, the words swimming on the page. I didn't even register Sarah's voice calling my name, asking what had happened. All I could do was stare at it, as if the sheer weight of the words would somehow sink in and make sense. This is just the beginning, Gabe had warned me when I first spoke to him. But even then, I had no idea how hard it was going to hit. The legal world felt like a labyrinth, and I was getting lost at every turn. Sarah came into the room and saw the look on my face. "John," her voice was shaky. "What does it say?" "They're not letting up. They've already lawyered up. They want me to stop this, now." I could see the color draining from her face, the worry in her eyes. This wasn't just a fight for me anymore. This was becoming a fight for our family's survival. I had no idea how much more we could take. The tension in the house was growing unbearable. With Jason's surgery coming up, every moment felt like it could unravel everything we had fought so hard to build. "I don't know if I can do this, Sarah," I confessed, my voice low, my mind racing. "Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm just throwing us into a deeper hole." "No," she said firmly, her eyes locking with mine. "We don't stop. Not now, not after everything." But as much as I wanted to believe her, as much as I wanted to keep fighting, I couldn't help. The nagging doubt in my mind. The company had more money, more power, more resources than I could ever dream of. They had the best lawyers in the business. They had the kind of people who could bury me if they wanted to. That night, after Sarah had gone to bed, I sat alone in the living room, staring at the fire. The letter burned in my hands, but not in the way I wanted. I wasn't inspired. I wasn't angry. I was just scared. I had been fighting for so long, but the truth was setting in. I had no idea what I was really up against. These people weren't just trying to save face. They were trying to protect their empire, and they would crush anyone who stood in their way. I ran my hands over my face, exhausted. How had it come to this? How had I gone from a hard-working employee, with a promotion just within reach, to a man on the edge fighting a battle that seemed bigger than me? I thought about Jason. His surgery was only days away, and the last thing I wanted was for him to see me like this. I wanted to be there for him, for Sarah. I wanted to be the dad who stayed calm and strong. But all I could feel was this growing weight pressing down on me. And yet, somewhere deep inside, there was a flicker of something. A part of me still refused to back down. I had to protect my family. I had to protect Jason's future. No matter how difficult it got, I couldn't let these people win. I couldn't let them get away with destroying us. The next morning, I reached out to Gabe. The cease and desist letter had thrown me off balance, but I couldn't stop now. "We have to respond, Gabe," I said when he picked up. "We can't back down. They're trying to intimidate me, and it's working." "You've got to get your head straight, John," Gabe said, his voice calm. "This is their game. They're throwing everything they've got at you to make you second-guess yourself. But they're not invincible. You've got something they don't. The truth." "I don't feel like I have the truth," I admitted. "It feels like they've already won. They've got the resources, the lawyers. How do we fight back against something like that?" "You fight by holding your ground," Gabe said firmly. "You need to understand that this is a marathon, not a sprint. They'll try to outlast you. They'll try to bleed you dry emotionally and financially. But you can't let them win that way." "I'm not going to let them win," I said, more determined this time. The fear that had been gnawing at me was still there, but it was shifting, turning into something stronger. "What's our next move?" "First, we get your response ready," Gabe said. "We're not backing down. We'll counter their cease and desist with a demand for documentation. You make them provide evidence that what they did to you was legal. Force their hand." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "Okay, let's do it." Gabe's voice was firm and reassuring, and for the first time since all of this started, I felt like I was taking control again. I wasn't just reacting to their moves anymore. I was making my own moves, and that felt like power, even if it was just a little bit. But as I hung up the phone, a new wave of anxiety hit me. I had made the decision. I was going to keep fighting. But at what cost? What was this really going to do to my family? To me? But there was no going back now. The company had made their move. Now, it was my turn, and I was ready to hit back harder than they ever expected. As I sat down to prepare the response with Gabe, I realized something. I had nothing left to lose. I had already lost my job. I had already lost my peace of mind. But I was not going to lose this fight, not for Jason's sake, not for Sarah's, and not for me. This was the moment I would make them regret ever crossing me. The response letter was ready, and it was sent. Gabe had done his part, drafting a strong legal reply that demanded the company provide proof of their claims and justify their decision. It felt like a small victory, one that gave me a brief respite from the overwhelming pressure. But I knew the company wouldn't just lie down and take it. They were a juggernaut, and I was just one man in a fight I barely understood. It was 2 days after sending the letter when the real bombshell hit. I was at home, pacing the living room while Sarah was in the kitchen preparing dinner. My mind was still fixated on the case, on what the next move would be. The phone rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I saw the caller ID, my stomach dropped. It was Jack. "John, you need to hear this," Jack said without preamble, his voice tense. "I've been digging into the company's financials, just a casual look, and I found something I think you need to know. There's more to this than just the firing." "What do you mean?" I asked, my heart racing. "Look, I didn't want to scare you, but I think you're being played. The company's restructuring? It's not just some corporate buzzword. They're setting up to sell part of their operations. And I think they've been cutting costs by getting rid of high-salary employees. People like you. You were a casualty in their bigger plan." I froze. "Wait, what? They fired me because they were cutting costs? That's the front story, yeah. But here's the thing," Jack continued, his voice low. "They've been prepping for a massive merger or sale for months. I'm talking about big money being moved around, stock deals, the works. And you're firing? It's part of a broader pattern. They've been systematically getting rid of employees they don't need, and that includes you. You weren't just cut for performance issues, John. You were cut because they saw you as disposable. You're not the only one. They've been doing it to a lot of people. I sank into the nearest chair, the weight of Jack's words crushing me. My mind raced. I had been nothing more than a pawn in their game, a number to cut when they needed to fatten their bottom line. All the long hours, the sacrifices, the loyalty, none of it mattered. To them, I was just a cost to be eliminated. Why are you telling me this now? I asked, my voice tight. What's your angle? No angle, man, Jack replied, his voice sincere. I know what this company did to you, and I don't want them to get away with it. But now that I know what's really going on, I think it changes everything. This isn't just about firing you. This is about a much bigger financial play. If we go public with this, if you expose what they're doing, this isn't just a wrongful termination case anymore. It's corporate malfeasance, it's fraud. I felt the world tilt beneath me. Fraud. They weren't just guilty of ruining my life, they were trying to pull off a massive financial scam. And if I could prove it, if I could expose them— Wait, I said slowly, a dark idea beginning to form. If I blow the whistle on this, I'm not just suing them for my job. I could take them down, completely. Exactly, Jack said, his voice full of urgency now. But be careful, John. You don't just take down a company like this without making some serious enemies. They've got deep pockets and they'll do everything they can to silence you. But if you play this right, you'll be doing more than getting revenge for your firing. You'll be doing a public service. I could hear Sarah in the background, calling my name. I hadn't realized how long I'd been talking on the phone. My head was spinning, and the last thing I wanted was to cause her more stress. But this was a game changer. I hung up the phone, my hands trembling. I needed time to think. I couldn't make decisions like this on impulse. I knew exposing the company could lead to consequences far worse than just losing my job. But it also felt like my only real shot at redemption. The company had already taken everything from me, my job, my dignity, my future. But if I could expose them for what they were really doing, it might not just change my life. It could change everything. Sarah came into the room looking at me, with concern. John, what's going on? Who was that? I couldn't answer her immediately. The words felt like they were stuck in my throat. They're not just trying to cut costs, I said finally, the weight of the revelation pressing on me. They're planning to sell the company. They've been getting rid of employees like me, people they think they can do without. Her brow furrowed. So you were just a number to them? I nodded, my voice barely above a whisper. I was disposable, just like so many others. And you're telling me this now because Jack thinks they've been doing something bigger, something illegal. They've been setting this up, and now I can't just sit back and let them get away with it. Sarah's eyes widened as she processed the information. You mean this could be worse than just losing your job? This could be a scandal. Yeah, I said, the gravity of the situation finally sinking in. It could be huge. If I can prove they're breaking the law, this could be more than just a personal fight. It could bring the whole company down. She paused, thinking it through, and then, to my surprise, she gave me a resolute nod. You can't just let them get away with this. You need to expose them. But John, you have to be ready for the fallout. If you do this, everything changes. It's not just going to be a legal battle anymore. It's going to be war. I know, I said, swallowing hard. But I'm not backing down, not now, not after everything. There was a long silence between us. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like I wasn't just reacting. I wasn't just fighting for survival. I was taking control. The company had made its move. Now it was time for me to make mine. And I wasn't going to just fight for myself. I was going to fight for everyone they had hurt, everyone they had wronged. If I could expose them for what they were doing, it could cost them everything. But it could also cost me. I had no illusions anymore. I wasn't just taking on a company. I was taking on an entire system built to crush people like me. And no matter what happened, I couldn't stop now. This wasn't just about my job anymore. It was about something far bigger. And I wasn't going down without a fight. The realization of what I was about to do hit me hard. There was no turning back now. I had gone from being the dutiful employee, putting in the hours, fighting for promotions, to becoming the man who would potentially bring down a massive corporation. The weight of that was staggering. For the next few days, I threw myself into the preparations. I had to gather everything, the records, emails, memos, and any correspondence that could serve as proof of the company's wrongdoing. Every conversation I had had with my superiors was now a potential piece of evidence. The offer letter that had once been a symbol of my hard work was now my weapon. But with every new detail I uncovered, I could feel the fear creeping up on. There was a gnawing doubt in the back of my mind. What was I doing? Was I really prepared to go up against a company that had millions to throw at this? What would happen to me and my family if I exposed them? If this escalated, it wouldn't just be about winning a legal case. This could mean financial ruin. It could ruin my reputation for good. Even if I won, there would be scars that couldn't be erased. I found myself pacing the house more often, unable to shake the feeling of being caught in a storm that was quickly spiraling out of control. I had told Sarah I was ready, but deep down I was terrified. The reality of what I was about to do was sinking in. I didn't want to admit it, but I began to wonder if I had the strength to follow through. There were moments when I would sit in front of my computer, staring at the evidence I had gathered, and I would freeze. I would think of Jason's upcoming surgery, of how this fight could destroy everything we had left. I had been fired, humiliated, and left alone in the cold. But was this really the right battle? Was I putting my family at risk for something that might not even work? I had spent so long trying to be the man who could solve every problem, fix the leaky roof, pay the bills, care for my family. But now, I was the one creating the problem. I was the one making the choice to take down the company, and no matter how much I justified it, I couldn't escape the thought that I was putting everyone in danger. The fight was no longer just about righting a wrong. It was about risking everything. I hadn't told Sarah how afraid I was. I couldn't. She was. Already walking on eggshells, worried about me, about the stress this was all causing. She had already stood by me through so much. If I told her how much doubt was clouding my mind, it might tear her apart. So, I kept it to myself. But that night, as I lay awake, my thoughts racing, I reached a breaking point. I couldn't keep pretending like everything was fine, like I had it all under control. I had to face the reality of the situation. I was scared. I was terrified. And no matter how hard I tried to push it down, I knew the fear was winning. I needed to hear it from someone else, someone who would understand. So I called Jack again. I hadn't reached out in a few days, but something inside me urged me to hear his voice, to remind myself that I wasn't in this alone. "Jack, I don't know if I can do this," I said, my voice cracking as soon as I spoke. "I thought I was ready, but I'm not. The stakes are too high. If I go through with this, everything will change. I'll destroy my career, maybe my family. I can't lose them, man. I don't know what's worse, the company screwing me over or me screwing my family over." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Jack didn't rush to reassure me. He let me speak, let the silence stretch out between us until I felt like I had said everything that was buried deep inside. Finally, he spoke, his voice calm but firm. "John, I'm not going to tell you not to be afraid. You should be afraid. This is big. But fear can't be your decision maker here. You've got a choice, but the right choice is always the hardest one to make. This is bigger than just getting revenge. This is about standing up for people like you, for people who are pushed down by systems that don't care. The company isn't just going to let you walk away. They'll keep doing this to other people. You can't let them keep getting away with it. You've got a chance to stop them, and you'll never know what you can achieve if you back down." Now, I sat in the dark listening to Jack's words. I had heard him say this before, but this time it felt different. His words weren't just advice. They were a call to action, a reminder of why I started this fight in the first place. But it didn't make the fear go away. The doubts didn't magically disappear. In fact, they only grew louder. "Jack, what if I lose? What if this ruins everything? What if the fallout is worse than anything I can imagine?" Jack's voice softened. "John, sometimes we have to risk everything for what's right. You can't predict the future, but you can control what you do right now. It won't be easy. It might not even be fair. But you've been through worse. This This is just one more hurdle. Don't back down just because it's hard. I stayed, quiet for a moment, the weight of his words settling in. The truth was, I couldn't unknow what I now knew. I couldn't let these people continue to get away with hurting others. It wasn't just about my job anymore. It wasn't just about me. It was about showing up for the people who didn't have a voice, the people who were silent because they were afraid to speak up, just like I had been. And then, I realized something. The fear would always be there, but I couldn't let it control me. I had to choose what mattered more. Was I going to let fear dictate my life, or was I going to stand up and make this fight count? Was I going to let them win? I took a deep breath. "You're right, Jack, I'm doing this, I'm not backing down." "Good," Jack said, sounding relieved. "Now get ready, this is going to get messy, but you've got what it takes to see it through." I hung up the phone and sat there in the quiet darkness. For the first time in days, I felt a sliver of resolve. The fear was still there, but it wasn't as loud anymore. I was going to fight this, no matter the cost. For me, for my family, for everyone who had ever been wronged by a system that didn't care. It was time to take back control. The real battle was just beginning. The decision was made. I wasn't going to back down, not now. Not after everything that had happened. It wasn't just about revenge. It wasn't about showing the company that they couldn't just walk all over me. It was about something bigger. I had to stand up, not just for myself, but for anyone who had ever been thrown aside in the name of profit. The days that followed were a blur of frantic action. I needed to act fast. The company wasn't going to wait around, and neither could I. I started gathering every document I could find, reaching out to anyone who might have been in a similar situation. I didn't know how deep this conspiracy went, but I had to be. Sure, I had everything in place before I moved forward. Gabe had become more than just a lawyer to me at this point. He was a lifeline, the only one who knew how to navigate this mess. He helped me refine my strategy. It wasn't just about a wrongful termination lawsuit anymore. It was about exposing a company that had been systematically cutting people like me to boost their stock prices and line the pockets of the higher-ups. We had to dig deeper, hit harder, and play smarter than they ever expected. The hardest part, though, was telling Sarah. I could see the stress in her eyes, feel the weight of the decision hanging between us. She had been holding it together so far, but I knew she was on the edge. This wasn't just my fight, it was hers, too. We sat down one night after the kids were asleep. I could tell she was waiting for me to speak, waiting for the next move in this game. The air was thick with uncertainty, and I felt like I was about to tell her something that would change everything. "Sarah, I've decided to move forward. I'm not going to let them get away with what they did. We have a chance to expose everything they've been doing, and I can't sit on the sidelines anymore. I've talked to Gabe, and he thinks we can take them down." She didn't say anything. At first, just stared at me, her face a mask of concern and exhaustion. It hurt to see her like this, like I was dragging her into the depths of this fight without fully knowing what the consequences would be. "You're sure?" she finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "This isn't just going to be about getting your job back, John. This could ruin everything. Our savings, our home, our future. It's not just your job we're talking about, it's everything." "I know," I said, my voice firm but soft. "But I can't live with myself if I don't fight. I have to do this. For Jason, for us, for everyone who's been hurt by a system like this. I can't let them win. If I back down now, they'll think they can do it to anyone. I can't let that happen." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't break down. She reached out and grabbed my hand, squeezing it tight. I could see the fear in her eyes, but there was also something else. A quiet strength that reminded me of the woman I married. She wasn't going to let me fight this alone. "I'll stand by you no matter what," she said, her voice steady. "But you need to promise me something. Promise me that you won't lose yourself in this fight. That we won't lose everything. No matter how hard this gets." "I promise," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "We're in this together. I'm not going to let it destroy us." And that was it. We were committed. The moment of uncertainty was over. There would be no turning back now. The next few weeks were a blur of meetings with Gabe, compiling evidence, and strategizing how to make our next move. The company had already hired a team of lawyers, and every legal expert we consulted warned us that this was going to get ugly fast. But we had one advantage, the truth. If we could expose their illegal practices, If we could prove they were intentionally trying to manipulate the system, the fallout would be catastrophic for them. But that didn't mean they would roll over easily. I spent every waking moment poring over documents, reviewing emails and memos, and cross-referencing everything. I started to feel like I was living in a fog, but in a way, it was comforting. I had a purpose now. I had a direction. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was fighting for something real. But the company wasn't just sitting back and letting us make our move. They came at us with everything they had. Cease and desist letters, threats of legal action, even public smear campaigns trying to paint me as a disgruntled employee. They tried to discredit me at every turn, flooding the media with stories that painted me as someone who couldn't accept being let go. But I knew this was just part of their plan, part of the game they always played with people like me. They wanted to make me look like the bad guy, to paint me as someone who was just angry about losing my job, not someone fighting for justice. The media attacks didn't faze me. I didn't care what they said about me. What mattered was what we could prove in court, and we were ready. We had the evidence, we had the witnesses, and we had the truth on our side. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. Each day the pressure mounted, but I refused to back down. I could see the toll it was taking on Sarah, the late nights, the stress, the worry. She was tired, just like I was. But she never once wavered. She kept telling me that this would be worth it in the end, that we could come out on top. And then, just when it felt like I was getting close to a breakthrough, something happened that I never expected. I received an unexpected call from someone inside the company. Someone who claimed they knew the truth. Someone who had been part of the company's internal team and was now ready to blow the whistle. "I've been watching what's happening, John," the voice on the other end of the phone said, low and shaky. "I can't be a part of this anymore. I have the documents you need, the ones that will prove everything, but you have to act fast. They're trying to cover it up." I felt my heart race as the implications of what this could mean sank in. This was the break I had been waiting for. This was the chance to make everything right. The walls were closing in on the company, and I was ready to take them down. The voice on the other end of the phone gave me chills. It wasn't just any employee. This was someone high enough in the company to have access to the very documents I needed to bring them down. Someone who had seen the manipulations and the deceit up close, and was willing to risk everything to expose it. "Who is this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though my heart was pounding in my chest. "I can't give you my name," the voice responded, anxiety evident in their tone. "But I'm an insider. I've been with the company for years. I've seen things that would destroy them if they came to light. I'm sending you everything I have, but you need to act quickly. They're cleaning up their tracks as we speak. If you don't move fast, it'll all be gone." I felt a surge of hope. This was the chance we had been waiting for, but it also felt like I was stepping into the unknown. What if this was a setup? What if it was all just some ploy to get me into deeper trouble? But I couldn't let those doubts stop me. This was the proof we needed. This was the moment that could turn the tide. "I'll do whatever it takes," I said, my voice firm. "Send me everything, and don't worry, I'll protect you. You've done the right thing by coming forward." After a few seconds of silence, the voice responded, "I'm sending the files to your email." There are email chains, financial reports, and internal memos. It's all there, but like I said, you have to move fast. They'll be looking for leaks. And with that, the call ended, leaving me alone with the weight of what was to come. I sat there, staring at my phone, waiting for the email to arrive. My hands were shaking, the uncertainty of what we were about to face starting to creep back to my mind. But I couldn't let fear stop me now. I had come too far, fought too hard, and there was no turning back. The email came in 5 minutes later, as promised. I clicked open the attachment, and my eyes widened as I began to skim through the documents. It was everything. Proof of the company's illegal practices. The evidence we needed to back up everything we had been claiming. They had been systematically overvaluing their stock by cutting employee costs, eliminating people they thought were expendable, and falsifying financial reports to create the illusion of stability. The email chains and memos even revealed that certain executives had been preparing for the company's sale, using illegal methods to drive up the company's value before they sold it off to the highest bidder. I felt a rush of vindication. This was it. This was the proof we needed to take them down. But I also knew that this was only the beginning. If the company found out that someone had leaked this information, it would mean war.